All right, so added flavor. I'm gonna assume that you're able to get Windows installed. That shouldn't be the biggest of your worries. So I think during the install, one of the things that I will mention that I added a little bit ago is if you're in the situation where you're installing Windows and you don't know which one to get, because there are 4 options right when you start to install. One is standard desktop experience, data center desktop experience, and then standard and data center with command line. So you obviously want the desktop experience. I'm not that brutal. Though Linux will be, because, I mean, that's just kind of how Linux is. So, yeah, standard or data center with desktop experience when you get that installed. One of those 2 choices there does not really matter. Standard and data center, the only real difference is how many VMs you can run. It's a licensing thing, so don't worry too much about it. Neither will stop you from doing the whole entire semester. So just follow these recommendations. Again, this is the lower bound. Make sure you have at least this. More is better, obviously. So install the server, use the entire disk, and then you'll be running around the interface finding some of these things. Now, a lot of these things you can search for, but this is really the point where you want to bust out that book from last semester, take a look over it, and find these things if you're having trouble. But again, most of it's searchable, and it's pretty much all going to be through the server manager anyway. So let me see. And as far as hostname goes, I need to do that anyway, so I guess if you want, you can follow along. Here in local server, you can just click on computer name right there. Remember, this doesn't do anything. That's description. Change it here. I should have came in with a host name already. So I'm gonna do something super generic. And of course, you got to reboot. So you typically want to do that before you start installing any roles. So I'm going to get that done real quick. And then the other big thing that you want to do is in the original setup instructions, I mentioned right here, your new Windows Server 2016 VM is going to need to be on the internal network. Windows, same as your Windows 10 VM that you set up last week. So the process is exactly the same. You do that in VirtualBox. I might even be able to do it. Oh, wow. It's already rebooted. So one thing. You're going to get a lot of Mac fan noise. That's just something I cannot fix. They're so sealed up. There's just, the air gets through it is the air that gets through it. That's pretty much it. All right, so local server, go check that. Make sure it did actually take. I guess it's not a bad idea to set the time zone either, huh? Now, I'm not going to grade this on you, but if you actually want it to have the right time, you'll need to go in and do this. Because that is, in fact, the right time. Cool. All right, so as far as networking goes, like I said, same as your Windows 10 VM. You can do that while the VM is on. There's nothing special about this. This is like unplugging and replugging in an Ethernet cable. So, yeah, you can do that whenever. Make sure it's on the correct network. Yours probably says Windows, not Win. It does not matter. The name doesn't matter much at all. But I am looking for Windows on yours. But if you did change it, just note it in the PDF so I know what I'm looking for. And then it will yell at me, but it should. There it goes. Now, all the while, I didn't mention it before, but all the while pfSense is on. Remember, I mean, pfSense is your router. You don't go home, log on to the Wi-Fi, and expect all the internet and networking to work if your router is not on. And that's why I made such a big deal about saying, you know, it's regular router. It's just a router. It's just a router last time, because it's important. It's very important that you understand what role pfSense plays in this whole situation. Because, yeah, not having it on, it'll totally break everything. And one other thing I need to do is install the guest edition stuff. I did it on Windows 10. I forgot to do it here, but shouldn't take too long. Go ahead and do that. And just as a reminder to you, it's a good idea to have them in. And it's actually more dire on the Mac than it is on Windows. For some reason, the mouse just is insanely slow on a Mac. And this is all Windows VMs. Linux VMs are not affected as much, or not nearly as much. But yeah, for sure. There it goes. It's already sped up.
You need to have pfSense on and running when we're working on this.
Yep, 100% all the time. Never leave it off. I mean, this is the same as you know, it's the same kind of idea. It's on the same level as does my router need to be on when I go home with my laptop to be able to get Wi-Fi? You know, it's that same kind of, it absolutely always has to always be on. You know what I mean?
Okay. And I was looking through my Windows servers. I have Enterprise Edition. Is that the wrong?
Is it server 2016?
No, what? Yeah, it's server 2016.
It probably is. I may have given you guys this last semester. But I'm not sure. It'll probably be fine, no matter what. Yep. Nick, I'll show you. All right. So here is the deal. ipconfig, really what you want to do is a couple of different things. Number one, specifically pay attention to this line. Statically assign the second reserved IP address in the Windows network. So think about the Windows network already. Let's take a look here because it's got our IP address. So I said in the last lab to reserve the first 5. So obviously you can't count 0 because it's the network ID. It's not usable. There's nothing to reserve there. It is on its own reserved, but had nothing to do with you. So if you are reserving, you're reserving from 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Those are the first 5. 1 is obviously one of those. So be aware that 1 is one of the 5. And that is reserved, obviously, for our router. Now, the second reserved IP address would be 2, right? Obviously. So the reason I want you guys to do... Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Man. I need you guys to do ipconfig for the screenshot so that I can figure out what IP address you actually reserved. And it should be some form of 2. But if you start out, you'll see what IP address you do have. That's not 2. So we need to fix it. But the thing that I want you to do here with ipconfig is gather up all the information. Because if you're going to statically assign all this stuff, you need to know what to statically assign. So go figure it out. This is the idea. Your IP address is that. That will change. Your subnet mask will not change. Your default gateway will not change. Well, that you don't get a choice. DNS servers will not change. So now you know the information that needs to go into a static assignment. So you can do that a couple ways. Actually, you can do it through Server Manager too. Figure since we're in the server, we might as well. So hit Ethernet here. Right click, hit properties. It saves you a couple clicks, so it's not a bad idea to go through there. And then, of course, yeah, I don't know. You may have missed that, but I accidentally triple clicked. Ended up clicking right there. It's not normally on. So, but that you do want it on. what was it? 172.16.100. 16.100 dot your second reserved IP address. Make sure the subnet mask is correct. Your gateway. Whoa. And your DNS server. That will eventually change when we start setting up DNS servers and all that stuff, but for now, it is what it is. We might even get the third network pop up, but it may not because it knows it's on the same network. No, looks like it's good. It doesn't ask. All right, well, just to make sure that you get your IP address set, that's how you do it. Your time zone. Yeah, just make sure you got the time zone set. If you do TZ util G, that will tell me what time zone you have. That way I don't have to guess or make you guys kind of figure out what I want on in the graphical user interface or something like that. So it just is what it is. So make sure that it says the correct time zone there. And then it's time to start getting DHCP done. Now, one thing that I do not mention here in the lab is that in pfSense, you have to turn DHCP off. The whole reason for this is that you can only ever have one. So, and the reason I don't go too far into it is because it was a topic in the last class, in your Network Directory Services class. When you guys cover DHCP, you guys talk about the way that DHCP works. So the long and short of it is basically, if you have two DHCP servers that do not connect to each other and don't really know about each other, they will fight. They will quite literally just try to be the fastest person to respond to the guy that's asking for an IP address on the network, right? So you get a new laptop, connects up to Wi-Fi, and it says, hey, I need an IP address. Both of those servers will receive that request because it is a broadcast type request. And both servers will quite literally answer the request as well. So that means that your laptop will be the servers will be trying to give your laptop two different IP addresses that may or may not agree. And if that is the case, your laptop will take the first one. The end. So whichever DHCP server is, number one, quicker on the processing of the initial request for an IP address, and then ultimately, whichever one is physically closer. So let's assume that there are two DHCP servers configured exactly the same on the exact same network, but one is 50 feet away from you physically, like wires over the wire, and one is 150 feet. Physics says that the one that is closer to you will end up responding to you faster, just because it'll take a millisecond or two less to move 50 as it would 150. So, yeah, this all gets into some really weird DHCP stuff. But the long story, or the short story, is just have one. And if you install DHCP on Windows Server, you're not going to just have one, right? Because pfSense is doing this as well. The downside of this is that you can't really do it from the server. I don't think we have Edge on here. Ugh, we don't. And I don't think Internet Explorer is going to let me do it. 172. Yeah, number one, Internet Explorer is already configured to not deal with JavaScript. It will pretty much turn off all JavaScript. Yeah, it works, but look at that. The pfSense is successful, and Internet Explorer decided to just kick me back out. So the easier way to do this without going outside of best practice is to run a second machine. Make sure that's back on Win. A little bit less RAM. You might hear these fans kick on like crazy. Whoa. too much scaling windows. And the reason I'm talking about this, the reason I'm talking about best practice here is because on a server, you should not be doing non-server things, which is basically going to the internet. There's no reason for you to surf the web on a server. That's just not something that you need to be doing on any regular basis whatsoever. If you have no choice, I mean, I understand, but just be aware that it's so much easier to get the file or to access the resource on a separate machine. Do it that way. If it is files and you trust the file, obviously, you can put it in a network share that the server can get at instead of trying to download the file on the server, because you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to be able to get files to download on a Windows server. And I mean, to be honest, I'll show you how to do it, but it's not something that you should be doing. So I'm not chomping at the bit to do that. Yes, yes. Yes, 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 yes. What? Oh, true. All right. So you're going to really get to see how all this works. Now, number one, there are 2 DHCP servers running in your pfSense box. One is on Windows. That is the one we are disabling today. So just uncheck enable. That means disable. And go all the way down, save that goodness. If you go over to Linux, you'll notice, still on. They are independent of each other. Because obviously, 2 networks may not have the same exact configuration. All right, well, that's really all we needed Windows 10 for. But we're going to need something to test whether or not our IP addresses work in Windows Server. All right, so do make sure that you turn off DHCP Server and pfSense. Otherwise, you're going to be complaining to me about not being able to figure out where your leases are. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. So, let's get DHCP role installed. Go on through, role-based configuration. Obviously, this server, DHCP server is what we want. Yes, you do want the tools. Otherwise, you won't be able to configure it. Now, there are times where you don't want the tools, though. If you're running a Windows Server headless, all right, what's the point of installing the tools? You can't run them anyway. Yep. Nick, that gets almost everybody. And you know, it's not a bad thing at all. I think it's, no one's ever really made you care about the DHCP server until about right now. Like, you could just follow the steps and not have a care in the world, and then all of a sudden, now you need to know how it works. That is why I love this class. You can't get by on assumption anymore. Whatever is between knowing for sure and assumption, there's a middle there. That's what I'm trying to strike here in this class. Because fully understanding, man, I don't know, requires a lot of experience, I think. Sometimes you just have no choice but to get slapped in the face with the answer. And then, only then, do you really understand what's going on. All right, so feature installation, configuration required. What does that mean? Look at that little flag up here. You got to remember, some of these things, like DHCP, DNS is not like this, but Active Directory, things like that, they do require additional configuration. So just follow the wizard. It will walk you through most of this stuff. And here's what we're going to do on the DHCP server. We're going to create these 2 groups, right? This way, so the whole point of this, and you get DNS, you do this with DNS, you get domain admins, things like that when you install other roles as well. But in this particular role, if you want people to be able to change things in DHCP without also being like global administrators of everything, you can stick them in this group. And if you want to restrict people that are getting DHCP stuff. You can utilize this group for that purpose. Yep, creating the groups, done. Hooray! That's really all it meant by configuration. But now you got this guy in tools. And a few things that you want to do. Now, I have to be honest, I have not done this in a while, so I'm a little on the rusty side. But yeah, most of the time, all you're really going to need to do on something like this, DHCP is already installed, but it doesn't care about what you want. You've got to tell it what you want. So you've got to come in here and add a scope under IPv4. So right-click here, new scope. Let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yep, yeah, okay. So the next step is quite literally to make scope. So good. We're on the right track. Where did my VM go? There it is. All right, so next, name your scope. I'm going to be real generic there. Windows Network. All right, so again, remember back. I said reserve the first 5. Outside of that, do I say same IP address range as in pfSense? So whatever you had there, I think I had 100 to 199. So that's, yeah, just transfer it over. Whatever you had, and I keep getting the wrong one. Whatever you had in pfSense. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. 199. Cool. Make sure to change that. That is, and they give you the ability to talk about it by CIDR, which is really, really nice. Instead of having to type that out, because just typing that out is just it annoys me. I'm so glad CIDR exists so that I can just type 24 instead. All right. So there's also another requirement that I say. So we're talking about leases and. Ooh. Oh, well then, never mind. So I'm going to talk about this anyway. So if you just want to be 100% positive about what you are excluding, then this is where you want to do it. So I said I want to reserve the first 5 IP addresses of the network, right? This is how I'm going to do that. And you don't actually have to do this. If your DHCP scope does not include the IP addresses you want to ignore or that you do not want to assign automatically, then you really don't have to do anything. This is more just punctuation on the end of that, right? Like, so if someone were to come in behind me and create another scope that includes more IP addresses or something like that that also happens to overlap with this, it will not work. The exclusions are asked. What did I do? Did I break something? How weird is that? Right? I was in 100, right? Is that what my leases was? Oh, I see what it's saying. Actually, yeah, so you can't even do this. So what I'm talking about is if this range included, so yeah, that went even further than I was expecting. So if this range started at 1 and went to 199, then this would have worked. But because 1 through 5 is not even in the scope, it doesn't even matter. And this is what I was getting at, that like you don't have to do this. And not only in Windows do you not have to do this, you cannot do this unless it actually is included within the scope. So long story short, skip it. Now, this lease time thing, I think I say one day. So set this to 1 day. I am not going to set it because that is that's a perk of being the instructor, I guess, right? All right. And then DHCP options. So we need to set the router scope option and DNS server scope option. What do I mean by that? So yes, I want to configure these options. You can do it here. The router. What is the default gateway of this network? It's that. Verify that it is what, like, do not just type in what I type in on the screen. You need to be using your gateway. And same here with DNSs. Because my server already had the DNS of this, it went ahead and it went ahead and imported it. And that's the only DNS server that we care about here, so that'll work. Don't worry about Win Server. It's nothing that we need to worry about. It's just Windows communicating with other Windows machines, and whether you want that, that's up to you. Do you want to activate the scope? This is the last bit. If the scope is not active, it will not work. It will not assign IP addresses. So yes, you want to turn on that scope. So the thing that you need to pay attention to is, number one, if you have already configured those two options within the wizard, you need to know how to find them. So under the scope, scope options, there they are, router, DNS servers. Address leases, yeah, empty now, but it shouldn't be here in just a minute. We are going to get our Windows 10 machine to pull an IP address, and we should see it in here. So let me make sure we touched on everything. Got the scope there, got the lease. Well, I didn't set it, but you will set it. Router scope, DNS server scope options. And then, yeah, get it to request a new DHCP IP address. So, pop. Oh, do not do a search. Windows, really? Windows, why? Why do you do this? Every time I type CMD, I do not want to go to the internet. Like, ugh. Sometimes, guys. Sometimes. All right. Right? Still says my DHCP server is 100.1. Well, that ain't true. Well, actually, technically it is. But it's not supposed to be true. So we need to fix that. How do we drop an IP address, an IP lease? How do we drop one? Release. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Cool. Oh. Get a new one. All right, Nick, it's pretty much the end of it. So if you get to this point, then you're golden. You should be able to get all your stuff. Look at that. So DHCP server. Bam. It is the new DHCP server, not the old DHCP server. If it still says .1, you've broken something. Well, actually, you broke things two ways. Number one, pfSense is still running DHCP server. But number two, your Windows server is slower than pfSense. So, two things. Anyway, that'll do it. Oh, we got to go check address leases. Right? I said that was empty. Shouldn't be empty anymore. If it is still empty, and you know darn well that your machine is picking up an IP address from your Windows Server DHCP server or Windows DHCP server, hit refresh. Bingo, bango. There it is. Verify hostname. Desktop, blah, blah, blah. Come over here. Desktop, blah, blah, blah. That's my hostname there. And, just in case. Well. At the end of another lab, gather up those screenshots, stick them all in a PDF. Ron, just a PDF. That's all. All right. Just a PDF. Those docx's, I swear, when y'all submit docx's, it takes Moodle forever to render that page. So I just sit there listening to my music, tapping my foot. Any day, Moodle, any day. All right, but I'll stop the recording here. That's really all there is to do. Once you get that all done, gather those screenshots, submit me a PDF, and you're done. You're done for the whole week.